They tell you the stories of the wives of the fallen angels. They say those women were innocent victims, delicate flowers caught in a storm they did not create. That is a lie, a beautifully crafted lie designed to conceal a truth that is far more terrifying. But the greatest lie of all, the one that has been buried under millennia of dust, is not about their sin. It is about the one woman who dared to stand up in the heart of the great cosmic betrayal and the unimaginable price she paid. This is not the story you hear in church. This is not the legend written in the official texts. This is the forgotten echo of a lost world, a tale of power, of damnation, and of a single act of sacrifice with the power to change the very judgment of heaven. And I promise you, the end of this story is unlike anything you have ever imagined. It will make you question the nature of sin, of punishment, and of true justice. Before we pull back the secret veil that has shrouded the primeval world, tell me something. Connect with me right here, right now. Where are you on this planet? And your clock, what time does it show? Comment below. Let me know that you and we are traveling back through time together, about to witness a truth reborn. Ben, all right. Take a deep breath. The air you are about to breathe will carry the scent of a bygone age. In the dawn of time, when the world was still young and the laws of creation were still being written, two civilizations existed like day and night, like fire and water. Atop the sacred mountain, a peak that pierced the very heavens, where the air was thin and pure, lived the fire keepers. They were an ascetic tribe, clad in coarse-woven robes, eating what the earth humbly provided. Their lives were an endless song of discipline, of worshiping the primordial order of the universe. They did not pray for power, nor did they seek wealth. They had but one sacred duty: to keep the divine flame of creation from ever fading, a flame that symbolized the balance and harmony of all things. They believed that every being had its place, and to disrupt that order would lead to an irredeemable chaos. And then, at the foot of the mountain, spread out like a dazzling silken carpet, was the Silk Valley. It was a kingdom of unimaginable opulence, so rich it defied belief. Its rivers glittered like silver, its fertile fields yielded bountiful harvests, and its markets bustled with merchants trading the rarest of goods. The people of the valley adorned themselves in the finest shimmering silks and lived in exquisitely carved marble palaces. But behind this glittering facade was a profound spiritual void. They had every material possession, and so they began to crave that which was beyond a mortal's grasp. They looked up at the night sky, not with the reverence of the fire keepers, but with envy. They wanted to seize the stars. They wanted to possess the knowledge of the gods. They longed for immortality, for power, and for a legacy that would outlast death itself. Their wealth had birthed arrogance, and their arrogance had planted the seed of a dangerous ambition. And high above, in the distant celestial realm, beings were watching. They were not cold jailers, nor were they indifferent observers. They were the Star Guardians. Their mission was not merely to watch, but to protect and to empathize with humankind. They felt every joy, every sorrow, every aspiration of the small creatures below. They witnessed the austerity of the fire keepers with respect, but their hearts broke when they looked upon the emptiness of the people in the Silk Valley. They saw an intelligent, creative race, yet imprisoned by the frailties of mortal life, bound by sickness, old age, and death. The Star Guardians' love and compassion grew so vast that it began to blur the lines of cosmic law. They did not see lust, they saw only suffering, and they came to a decision that would shake both heaven and earth. They decided to descend. Not as conquerors, not as beings fallen to carnal desire, but with an intention so beautiful it was naive. They wanted to become teachers, fathers, to bring the gift of the stars to help humanity build a paradise on earth. They believed that by giving humans celestial knowledge, how to forge metals harder than diamond, how to read the stars to predict the future, how to heal all disease. They could erase all suffering and help mankind achieve a new level of existence. It was a noble intention, an act born of the purest love. But they were tragically unaware that knowledge without wisdom is the sweetest poison. And when the first star guardians touched down in the Silk Valley, carrying the light of the cosmos on their wings, they had unknowingly sown a seed of annihilation in the fertile soil of ambition. The sky above the Silk Valley that night was no longer a silent black expanse. It was set ablaze by streaks of falling stars, a meteor shower of pure light. The people poured from their lavish homes, gazing upward in awe and astonishment. And then, from within those halos of light, the star guardians emerged. They did not wear the fearsome faces of judges, but a surreal, otherworldly beauty and a gentle sadness in their eyes. They did not come with swords. They came with gifts. The first guardian, named Orelon, touched the dry, cracked earth, and from it, a spring of pure, clean water gushed forth, turning a patch of desert into a lush green oasis. The second, Lyra, pointed to the heavens and the secrets of the constellations, of the lunar cycles, of the very flow of time, were etched into the minds of the astrologers. Another guardian, Technor, breathed upon the cold forges, teaching humanity how to craft alloys of unprecedented strength, to build structures that reached for the clouds. The people of the Silk Valley felt as if they were living in a dream. They hailed the star guardians as saviors, as living gods who had answered prayers they never knew how to speak. They built magnificent temples to honor them. They offered their most precious treasures, their finest silks, their most beautiful dances. A golden age seemed to have begun. Sickness was healed, poverty was erased, humans lived longer, grew stronger, and their power seemed limitless. But it was here that the most tragic conflict began to unfold. A good intention had led to a horrifying consequence. The Star Guardians, in their joy at seeing their children flourish, failed to realize that their gifts were corrupting the very people they loved. Knowledge without humility turned into arrogance. Power without control turned into oppression. Humans, instead of using their new tools to build a better society, began using them to vie for power, to dominate one another. The ultra-strong alloys were not just for building bridges, but for forging sharper weapons. Astronomy was not just for calendars, but for divining the most auspicious times for war. In the midst of this slowly brewing chaos and fanaticism, two women saw the Star Guardians, but with two entirely different sets of eyes. The first was Moria. She was a priestess in a forgotten cult, a woman of sharp beauty and an ambition that burned like hellfire, while others saw the Star Guardians with adoration. Moria saw them as rungs on a ladder to ultimate power. She did not crave their love. She craved their bloodline. She understood that the union of the Guardians' knowledge and humanity's nature would create something entirely new, a power that could dominate the world. Moria actively approached the Star Guardians, not with common seduction, but with her intellect and her understanding of their ambition. She spoke to them of a grander future, a new order where humans and Guardians would rule together, erasing all the old archaic laws. She became a philosopher, an architect for the rebellion, manipulating the Guardians' good intentions into a plan for domination. And then there was Lyra. She was just a simple weaver living a quiet life at her loom. She had none of Moria's ambition, none of the crowd's fanaticism. When the Star Guardians appeared, Lyra felt only a vague sense of dread, a deep unease that the natural order of the world was being broken. She saw the arrogance growing in the eyes of those around her, but she was too weak. The wave of Star Guardian worship, steered by Moria, was so powerful that it swept away all doubt. Lyra was pulled into the vortex against her will, perhaps due to pressure from her family, perhaps by a false promise of a better future for her loved ones. And then the fateful moment arrived. On a night of the full moon, as the entire valley was lost in a spectacular festival to honor the guardians, Moria stood up and declared an eternal pact. She proclaimed that for the knowledge of the stars to truly merge with humanity, a sacred union must take place, a union of blood. The Star Guardians, by now so drunk on their role as saviors and mesmerized by Moria's rhetoric, agreed. They believed this was the final step to perfecting their paradise on Earth. It was not a tragedy of force. It was a pact signed in the shadow of ambition and naivete. Moria and the women who followed her offered themselves willingly. Lyra, in her silent fear, also became part of that pact. She could not resist. Her voice was too small against the roar of an entire kingdom. And from that union, the hybrid children were born. They were not monsters, at least not at first. They were called the Star-Blooded. The dawn of the age of the Star-Blooded was a breathtaking spectacle of glory. These children grew at an astonishing rate, possessing the beauty of humans and the power of the Star Guardians. They had superior intellect and extraordinary physical strength. A single Star-Blooded could lift a massive granite block as if it were a pebble. Another could look at a blueprint and instantly erect a magnificent tower overnight. They were master builders, genius artists, and unbeatable warriors. Under the leadership of the Star-Blooded, the Silk Valley was transformed. New cities rose up with architecture so complex and grand it defied gravity. Crystal bridges spanned the deepest chasms. Hanging gardens floated in mid-air, blooming with flowers that glowed in the night. The people of the valley worshipped the Star-Blooded as their king gods. They believed they were living in a golden age that would never end. Moria, the first mother of a Star-Blooded, had achieved her goal. She became the Empress, the head of a new empire, the mother of gods. Her power was absolute. But absolute power corrupts absolutely. The Star-Blooded, raised on a diet of praise and worship, began to see themselves not as protectors, but as rulers. The arrogance of the Guardians and the ambition of humans had combined within them to create an uncontrollable hubris. Why should they, superior beings, serve these weak, finite humans? The change was gradual, but certain. At first, it was just commands, then harsh laws, and finally, brutal oppression. Humans, once the blessed beneficiaries, became servants, then slaves in their own kingdom. Those who dared to speak out were crushed without mercy. The great monuments were no longer built by magic, but by the sweat, blood, and tears of thousands of slaves. The Silk Valley had become an empire of blood and tears. And in the midst of that cruelty, Lyra lived in a silent hell. Her son, Kaelan, was also one of the Star-Blooded. He too possessed incredible power and a transcendent intellect. But Lyra, horrified as she watched the other children become corrupted, did everything she could to protect her son from that same fate. She did not allow her son to participate in Moria's conquests or lavish feasts. Instead, she would secretly take Kaelan to the forests at the edge of the valley, where the rustling leaves and the babbling brooks still held some semblance of the natural order. She told him the stories she had overheard about the fire keepers on the sacred mountain. She taught Kaelan about compassion, about humility, about the pain of the powerless. She taught him to use his strength not to dominate but to protect, to use his intellect not to conspire but to understand. Lyra's life became a quiet, desperate struggle, an effort to save the human part of her godly son, a war against the very blood that flowed through his veins. Kaelan grew up torn. By day, he had to wear the mask of a proud Star-Blooded to avoid Moria's suspicion. But at night, in his mother's arms, he learned the value of tears, of empathy. He saw the slaves being beaten, and for the first time in the life of a Star-Blooded, he felt pain. He saw the despair in the eyes of the valley's people, and he felt ashamed. Meanwhile, Moria's empire expanded. The cruelty of the star-blooded spilled beyond the borders of the Silk Valley, spreading war and destruction to surrounding lands. They mocked the old gods, destroyed ancient temples, and declared themselves the sole masters of the world. The Star Guardians, their fathers, were now just pale shadows. They had lost control. Their good intentions had birthed an unstoppable monster. Some of the Guardians were filled with regret and sorrow, but it was too late. Others were swept up in their children's power, becoming advisors to the brutal empire. The cries of humanity, the screams of the innocent, and the arrogance of the star-blooded finally formed a dissonant chord that echoed all the way to the heavens. And this time heaven could no longer remain silent. The sky above the empire of blood and tears did not erupt in a storm. There was no thunder, no roiling dark clouds. On the contrary, it became unnervingly clear. The sun itself seemed to cease its warmth. The wind stopped blowing. Every sound of nature, from the bird song to the chirping of insects, abruptly died. A silence fell over everything, a heavy, oppressive silence that made even the mightiest of the star-blooded feel a crushing weight upon their chests. And then, from the center of that clear sky, a single point of light appeared. It was not brilliant, but cold. Like the light of a dying star, that point of light slowly descended, without a sound, without a stir of wind. Kaelan, the Arbiter of Judgment, had arrived. He did not bring a flaming sword or legions of angels. He came alone. His form was not immense, but his presence made an entire empire fall to its knees. Kaelan's eyes held no anger. They held no pity. They held only the emptiness of an absolute truth, an undeniable fact. The hour of judgment was at hand. His arrival was more terrifying than any rage. It was the certainty of an inescapable end. Moria, standing on the highest balcony of her palace, was the only one who did not tremble. Ambition had driven her mad. She looked at Kaelan not with fear, but with defiance. Kaelan did not immediately destroy the empire. His power could have turned the entire valley to dust in the blink of an eye, but that was not the way of divine justice. He came to offer a final judgment, a chance not for repentance, but for them to reveal their true nature. Kaelan's voice resonated not through the air, but directly into the mind of every living creature in the valley. This union is an abomination. The order has been broken. You have taken what was not yours and created what should not exist. Present yourselves before me. Justify your existence. Moria laughed, a sharp, cold sound that echoed across the silent square. She stepped forward, her head held high. Justify. You, an arbiter from a stale and fearful heaven. Our existence is our justification. You left humanity to languish in weakness and death. We gave them strength and eternity. We have built a world grander than your wildest dreams. This is not betrayal. This is evolution. And I, Moria, mother of the star-blooded, am its leader. Our power is righteous. Kaelan remained silent, his expression unchanged by her arrogant proclamation. He had foreseen this. Pride always destroys itself. And then, from the trembling crowd, a small figure emerged. It was Lyra. She did not look at Kaelan. She did not look at Moria. She led her son, Alien, who was trying to hide his fear behind the mask of a star-blooded. All eyes fell upon them. Moria looked at her with contempt. Lyra, who had lived her entire life in silence, now did something no one could have expected. She did not defy. She did not beg. She knelt. She clutched Elian tightly, and with her son, she prostrated herself on the cold stone before the Arbiter of Judgment. Arbiter, Lyra's voice trembled, but it was clear, ringing out in the deadly silence. I do not come to justify, for there is nothing to justify. We were wrong. I was wrong. I was weak, and I allowed fear and pressure to pull me into a sin I knew was wrong. She raised her head, and for the first time she looked directly into Kaelan's eyes. Her eyes held no defiance, only pain and resolve. "I do not ask you to spare my life. My life no longer has any value, but I beg you for my son." Kaelan started, looking at his mother. Lyra squeezed his hand. "He carries the blood of the guardians, but his heart is still human. He has learned compassion. He has learned to weep for the suffering of others." She took a deep breath and spoke the words that would reshape the entire outcome. "I do not ask you to forgive him. I ask you to cleanse him. Arbiter, if your power can destroy, then surely it can also heal. I implore you, strip away the star-blooded power from him. Take away the immortality. Take away the strength. Take away everything that does not belong to this world. Give him back his weakness, his mortality, the purity of a normal human being. Let him live a short life filled with love, rather than an eternal one in arrogance and cruelty." She bowed her head, tears streaming down her face. "And if the price for that cleansing is the life of the mother who committed this sin, then I am willing to pay it." The entire valley held its breath. Moria was stunned, disbelieving what she had just heard. Even Kaelan, the Arbiter of Judgment, who had witnessed thousands of rebellions and their punishments, paused for a fraction of a second. In his millennia of enforcing heaven's justice, he had known only two responses: arrogant defiance or fearful pleas for mercy. This was the first time he had witnessed something else. Not betrayal, but repentance. Not selfishness, but the unconditional love of a mother. Not a plea to live, but a plea to be saved from the sin itself. For a fleeting moment, the cold, rigid order of the universe seemed to crack, and a single warm ray of light shone through. Kaelan's judgment was finally executed, but it was no longer a single blade, swinging blindly. It had become a double-edged sword, cleanly separating punishment from mercy. For Moria, her loyal star-blooded, and the accomplices of the Empire, the curse was cast. But it was not death. Death would have been too easy a release. Kaelan knew that what they craved most was power and presence, so their punishment was to be deprived of both. A cold wind swept through the valley. Moria and her followers were not harmed, not a single scratch, but their bodies began to turn transparent, ethereal. Their strength evaporated like mist. Their powerful voices faded into weak whispers. They were transformed into the hollow echoes, beings forever trapped between worlds, unable to die, yet unable to truly live. They were cursed to wander the ruins of the empire they had built, eternally lamenting the power they had lost, the legacy that had turned to dust. They became a cursed cautionary tale, echoes of ambition, so that any in the future who contemplated breaking the order would hear their mournful cries on the wind. The marble palaces, the towers that defied gravity, all of it crumbled silently into dust, returning the valley to its original wild state. The remaining star guardians, those who had repented, were stripped of their wings and their power, sentenced to live out mortal lives just like the humans they once pitied, to relearn the lesson of humility. And then Kaelan turned to Lyra. She was still kneeling, clutching Elian, her eyes shut tight, awaiting judgment. Kaelan drew near. For the first time, his cold light seemed to soften. He said nothing. He simply reached out his hand, and a warm, pure light, like the first rays of creation's sun, enveloped the mother and child. The light did not carry the pain of destruction. It carried purification. Elian felt an immense power slowly draining from his body. It felt like shedding a great weight he had carried since birth. The arrogance, the cruelty, it all dissolved, leaving only a sense of relief and a human heart beating a normal rhythm. When the light faded, the world around them had completely changed. Lyra slowly opened her eyes. She was no longer in a valley of ruins. She was surrounded by a field of vibrant wildflowers. A small brook gurgled nearby, and the clean air carried the scent of fresh grass. Her son, Elian, was sleeping peacefully in her lap, no longer with the powerful aura of a star-blooded, but as an ordinary boy with gentle, even breaths. All memory of the guardians, of the empire, of the horror, had been wiped clean from their minds. They had been given a second chance, a new life, completely pure, to start all over again. They would become the ancestors of a new lineage, a line that would build its legacy not on power or grandeur, but on the love and humility that Lyra had fought so hard to preserve. They were not punished, they were saved. On a distant hill, Kaelan watched them for a moment. His task was complete, but this time it left behind not just a cleansed world, but a new awareness within him. He understood that heaven's true justice sometimes lies not in unyielding punishment, but in recognizing a seed of hope in the midst of despair and giving it the chance to grow. The Arbiter of Judgment turned silently and returned to the celestial realm, carrying with him the story of a mother who used her love to change the very verdict of the universe. The story of Lyra and Ilian, the story of an unexpected salvation, was erased from the annals of the world to protect their new beginning. But it was never forgotten in the heart of the cosmos. It became a silent legend, a reminder that even after the worst mistakes, even when facing final judgment, a single act of selfless love still has the power to rewrite destiny. History does not only record wars and punishments. Sometimes, in its forgotten pages, it whispers of second chances. The story that our channel just shared with you is a testament to that. In your own life, have you ever wished you could erase a mistake and start over? Have you ever witnessed a small act of kindness create a miraculous change? Share a story of an unexpected salvation you have known or experienced in the comments below, because sometimes true justice isn't an ending, but a brand new beginning. And if you believe that hope can be found in the darkest of places, if you want to explore more forgotten stories, more secrets of compassion hidden within the great tragedies of history, then do one thing: hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Join us not just as listeners, but as fellow travelers on a journey to find the warm sparks of light in the shadows of the past. Because every story told is another flame of hope rekindled.